This is the case of Elias Vance, a master sergeant in the U.S. Army's most elite Special Operations Unit, unlawfully detained on the morning of October 12th by Officer Garrett Finch of the Northwood Police Department. The incident occurred at Lakeside Park, an affluent suburban green space, where Master Sergeant Vance was completing a personal fitness routine while on leave. Officer Finch, responding to no specific complaint, initiated a stop based on the visual of a large black man in a gray, unbranded tracksuit standing near a late-model pickup truck. What began as a seemingly routine, yet biased, field interview escalated into a baseless accusation of criminal intent, unlawful detention, and attempted physical assault by the officer. The confrontation concluded only after Master Sergeant Vance was forced to leverage his unique professional status, resulting in a direct intervention from his commanding officer, a full colonel, and the immediate on-scene presentation of a federal civil rights lawsuit for $175,000 against Officer Finch and the Northwood Police Department. The flashing blue and red lights felt like a violation of the morning's quiet promise. They washed over the placid surface of the park's small lake, turning the tranquil scene into a stage for a confrontation Elias Vance knew was coming from the moment the patrol car slowed. He finished his cool-down stretch, placing his hands on the hood of his Ford F-150, his breath steady, his heart rate already under disciplined control. He was a man accustomed to extreme pressure, but this kind was different. It was a dull, grinding pressure, not the sharp, clean lethality of his profession. This was the friction of merely existing in a world that saw his skin before it saw the man. Officer Garrett Finch stepped out of the cruiser with a manufactured swagger, his hand resting casually on the butt of his sidearm. He was young, with a face that hadn't yet settled into the hardened lines of a veteran cop, but was already etched with an unearned certainty. His partner, a younger, leaner officer with the name Chun on his tag, hung back, his expression more neutral, more uncertain. "Morning," Finch began, the word clipped. He stopped a few feet from Elias, his eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan, from the worn running shoes to the powerful shoulders under the simple gray sweatshirt, to the calm, unblinking gaze that met his own. "Everything all right here?" Elias kept his hands in plain sight on the hood of his truck. "Perfectly fine, officer. Just finishing a run." His voice was a low baritone, calm and even. It was a voice trained to convey absolute authority in the middle of chaos, but here he modulated it to be as non-threatening as possible. "Just finishing a run," Finch repeated, a smirk playing on his lips. He let the silence hang for a beat too long. "You live around here?" The question was a classic tell. It wasn't about residency. It was about belonging. "Do you belong here?" "I'm on leave, visiting family nearby," Elias answered truthfully, offering no more than what was asked. He knew the script. Giving too much information was as suspicious as giving too little. Every word was a potential trap. "On leave from what?" Finch pressed, stepping a little closer. The air between them crackled. "The military," Elias said simply. Finch's eyes narrowed. The smirk tightened. "Right. The military. Got any ID on you, pal?" He didn't ask. He commanded. The word pal was dipped in condescension. Elias didn't move his hands. "It's in my wallet in the truck." "Am I being detained, officer? Have I committed a crime?" It was the question that always changed the temperature of these encounters. It forced the officer to articulate a reason, to move from vague suspicion to specific, legally defensible cause. Finch's jaw clenched. The thin veneer of casual inquiry evaporated, revealing the raw animosity beneath. "I'm conducting a field interview. We've had a string of break-ins in this neighborhood. A man matching your description was seen in the area. It was a lie, and they both knew it." The description was a black man. That was always the description. A tall black man in a tracksuit? That must narrow it down for you, Elias said, the irony in his voice as dry as dust. He still hadn't moved. His posture remained relaxed, but his senses were on high alert. He cataloged Finch's stance, the position of his partner, the growing audience of a woman pushing a stroller on the far path, and an elderly couple on a park bench who had stopped pretending to read the paper. Finch's face flushed with anger. The challenge to his authority, however quiet, was more than he could tolerate. "Look, I don't have time for games. I asked you for your ID. You're going to give it to me, or I'm going to detain you for obstruction." It's your choice. He unsnapped the keeper on his holster. It was a small movement, but it was as loud as a gunshot in the quiet park. The sound shifted everything. It was no longer a conversation. It was a threat. Elias took a slow, deliberate breath. He had faced down men with rifles, men with bombs strapped to their chests. He had navigated the intricate politics of foreign warlords and the life-or-death calculus of a hostage rescue. And now, in a quiet American park, he was being threatened by a local cop with an ego problem because he was a black man out for a morning run. "Officer," Elias said, his voice dropping slightly, losing its conciliatory edge and gaining a new hardness, a new weight. "You have no reasonable, articulable suspicion to demand my identification. You have not witnessed me commit any crime. Your description is unconstitutionally vague. Therefore, this is an unlawful stop. I am not required to identify myself. However, to de-escalate, I will tell you my name is Elias Vance. Now, I'm asking again, am I free to go?" The legal precision of his words seemed to enrage Finch more than any insult could have. This wasn't the response he expected. He wanted fear, or supplication, or angry shouting that he could use as a pretext for force. What he got was a calm, dispassionate legal lecture. "You think you're a lawyer now?" Finch sneered, stepping so close Elias could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You're not free to go until I say you're free to go. Now I'm giving you one last chance. Show me your ID." His partner, Chun, shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Garrett, maybe we just run the plates on the truck?" he suggested, his voice quiet. Finch shot him a venomous look. "I'm handling this." Chun, he turned back to Elias, his eyes blazing. "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice." He reached for his handcuffs. This was the precipice. Elias knew that if those cuffs went on, the situation would spiral. An arrest, even a wrongful one, was a bureaucratic nightmare that could compromise his security clearance, his career, his entire life. He had to stop it, but he had to do it with words, not action. His training screamed at him to neutralize the threat, to create space, to dominate the encounter physically. But his life experience, the hard-earned wisdom of a black man in America, told him that any physical response, no matter how justified, would be a death sentence. "Officer Finch," Elias said, his voice a blade of cold steel, "if you touch me, you will be committing assault. You are acting outside the color of law, and any action you take from this point forward will have severe personal and professional consequences for you." The woman with the stroller had stopped walking. Her phone was out, its small black lens pointed directly at them. The elderly couple was also watching, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The silent audience was growing. "Are you threatening me?" Finch growled, his hand hovering over Elias's wrist. "I am stating a fact," Elias corrected him. "You are creating a liability for yourself and your department. I am a master sergeant in the United States Army. I hold a top-secret/SCI clearance. An unlawful arrest, even for a misdemeanor, triggers a series of mandatory security reviews that could impact national security assets. You are interfering with the duties of a member of the armed forces. I strongly advise you to stop." He said it all without blinking. Each word was carefully chosen, a piece of a larger strategy. He was giving Finch an off-ramp, a way to back down without completely losing face. He was also laying the groundwork for what was to come. Finch hesitated for a fraction of a second. The mention of a security clearance, of the Army, gave him pause. But his pride, his anger, and the deep-seated prejudice that had started this whole encounter quickly overrode his caution. He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "A master sergeant? Yeah, right. And I'm the King of England. You think throwing out some military jargon is going to scare me? You're just another thug making threats. That's it. We're done talking." He lunged, grabbing for Elias's arm. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move, and Elias could have avoided it with contemptuous ease. Instead, he allowed the contact, but only for a moment. He shifted his weight, not pulling away, but rooting himself to the ground. Finch's grip was surprisingly weak, fueled by anger rather than technique. "Final warning, officer," Elias said, his voice dangerously low. "Request your supervisor to this location. Immediately. You can request whatever you want from the back of my car," Finch grunted, struggling to wrench Elias's arm behind his back. But it was like trying to move a statue. Elias remained perfectly still, a calm anchor in Finch's storm of fury. "Okay," Elias said softly. It was a word of concession, but not of defeat. It was the sound of a door closing on one path and another, far more serious one, opening. "I will show you my ID." Finch, surprised by the sudden compliance, loosened his grip slightly. "Damn right you will," he panted, trying to catch his breath. Elias slowly, deliberately, reached into the back pocket of his sweatpants. He moved with an economy of motion that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. He pulled out a worn leather wallet and from it extracted a plastic card. He didn't hand it to Finch. He held it up for him to see. It was a Department of Defense Common Access card. It had his picture, stern, official, in uniform. It had his name, Vance Elias M., and his rank, MSG/E8. But it was the small, almost invisible insignia of his unit that held the real power, though Finch was too ignorant to recognize it. Finch squinted at the card. "Message. So you really are a sergeant. Big deal. That doesn't make you special. You still answer to the law." His confidence was returning, buoyed by what he perceived as Elias's submission. He saw the card not as a warning, but as a victory. He had broken the suspect's resistance. "You are correct, officer. I do answer to the law. We all do," Elias said, his eyes locking with Finch's. "And the law requires you to have probable cause, which you do not. The law protects citizens from unlawful seizure, which you are attempting. And the law holds you accountable for your actions. You seem to be forgetting that part." He slid the CAC back into his wallet. "I have complied with your unlawful demand. Now, I am once again asking you to call your supervisor." The mention of accountability, the calm certainty in Elias's tone, began to finally pierce Finch's armor of arrogance. He glanced over at the woman with the phone, who was now narrating quietly into it. He looked at his partner, Chun, whose expression was now one of open alarm. The situation was no longer a simple roust. It was being documented. It was becoming complicated. "Fine," Finch snapped, pulling out his radio. "I'll get a supervisor out here. But you're not going anywhere. This is an active investigation now." It was a weak attempt to regain control, to frame the narrative as him being the one in charge. Elias simply nodded. He leaned back against his truck, crossing his arms. He was prepared to wait. He knew the next phase would be decisive. He had given Finch every chance to walk away. Now, he would be forced to escalate in a way Finch couldn't possibly anticipate. The wait for the supervisor was a tense, silent affair. Finch stood near his cruiser, speaking in low, agitated tones into his radio. Chun kept his distance, pointedly looking anywhere but at Elias. The small crowd of witnesses had grown. A young man on a bicycle had stopped, his own phone now recording from another angle. The park was no longer a place of recreation. It was a theater of low-grade tyranny, and everyone was watching. Elias remained motionless, a study in controlled patience. Inside, however, a cold anger was burning. This was the tax he paid for his own freedom. He fought overseas in the shadows to protect a country that, in the bright light of day, still saw him as a threat. He had bled on foreign soil for the very rights that this cop was trying to strip from him on a public street. The irony was a bitter pill. Finally, another patrol car arrived, this one with a sergeant's stripes on the sleeve of the officer who emerged. Sergeant Pryor was older, thicker around the middle, with a weary expression that suggested he'd seen this kind of mess 1,000 times before. He walked over to Finch, and the two spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Finch gesticulated wildly, pointing at Elias, his voice rising in frustration. Pryor listened, his gaze flicking over to Elias, then to the citizen journalists documenting the scene. Pryor walked over to Elias, his approach far more cautious than Finch's had been. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Pryor. My officer tells me you were refusing to cooperate, Sergeant," Elias said, his tone respectful but firm. "Your officer is mistaken. I was asserting my Fourth Amendment rights during an unlawful, suspicionless stop. Officer Finch could not articulate a single reason for detaining me, other than my race and my presence in this park. He then escalated the situation by threatening me, lying about a suspect description, and attempting to illegally arrest me." Pryor's eyes narrowed. He was no fool. He could see the phone cameras. He could see the calm, intelligent man in front of him was not the uncooperative thug Finch had likely described. And he could smell the lawsuit coming from a mile away. "He says you claim to be military," Pryor said, testing the waters. I am, Elias replied. I showed him my active duty ID. Okay, Pryor said, nodding slowly. Look, we can clear this all up. There's probably been a misunderstanding. It was the standard line, the institutional attempt to smooth things over, to make the problem go away. But Elias wasn't interested in smoothing things over. A misunderstanding didn't involve a hand on a gun and a threat of arrest. There's no misunderstanding, Sergeant, Elias said. Your officer profiled and harassed me. He abused his authority. This isn't something we can just clear up, he held Pryor's gaze. I've been more than patient. But my patience is now at an end. I need to make a phone call, Pryor hesitated. A phone call to who? Your lawyer? No, Elias said. To my commanding officer, a flicker of something, disbelief, amusement, alarm, crossed Pryor's face. He clearly thought it was a bluff, a desperate move by someone trying to sound important. But something in Elias's dead serious demeanor made him pause. Go ahead, Pryor said with a wave of his hand, a hint of a challenge in his voice. Make your call. Elias pulled out his phone. He didn't search through contacts. He dialed a number from memory, a number he could dial in his sleep. He put the phone to his ear. It rang twice. A voice answered, crisp and professional. Watchtower, go. Elias's entire demeanor shifted. His voice became clipped, precise, stripped of all emotion. It was the voice of a soldier reporting. This is Victor 7. I have a LEO interaction, hostile. Requesting direct patch to an O6, operational priority. There was a half-second pause on the other end. The language was specific, coded. Victor 7 was his call sign. LEO interaction, hostile, was a classification for a specific type of incident. O6 was the pay grade for a full colonel. Operational priority meant drop everything else. Stand by, Victor 7, the voice said. Pryor and Finch exchanged a look of confusion. The language was alien to them. They were out of their depth, and they were just beginning to realize it. A new voice came on the line, a voice that radiated command presence even through the tiny speaker of the phone. This is Colonel Davies. What's your status, Master Sergeant? Elias switched the phone to speaker, holding it out so the two officers could hear. Colonel, this is Master Sergeant Vance. I'm currently being unlawfully detained by Officer Garrett Finch, badge number 714, and Sergeant Pryor of the Northwood Police Department. Location is Lakeside Park, Northwood. I was conducting PT when Officer Finch initiated a stop without cause and has since threatened me with arrest. The colonel's voice came back, now laced with ice. Understood. Put Sergeant Pryor on the line. Pryor's eyes widened. He stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. He hesitantly took a step closer. This is Sergeant Pryor. Sergeant Pryor. This is Colonel James Davies, United States Army. The voice boomed from the phone. You are currently detaining a senior operator from a Tier 1 Special Mission Unit under my command. To be clear, that means you have a man who is a vital national security asset standing on your curb while your officer harasses him. This incident is being logged on a federal channel. I am, as we speak, personally calling your chief of police, the mayor of this city, and the governor's office. A formal complaint will be filed with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division by noon today. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't also make a call to the FBI to open an investigation into your department for the targeted harassment of a federal employee. The silence that followed was absolute. Finch's face had gone from flushed red to a pasty, sickly white. His swagger had completely evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer panic. Pryor was stammering, trying to form words. Colonel, sir, there's been a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Sergeant, the colonel roared, his voice crackling with fury. My man is a professional, a decorated combat veteran who has done more for this country than you can possibly imagine. For him to be treated like a common criminal in his own country by a local cop on a power trip is unacceptable. It will not stand. Release him immediately. That is a direct order from a superior authority in this matter. Do you understand me? Yes. Yes, sir. We understand, Pryor mumbled, his eyes darting around nervously. Master Sergeant Vance, are you free to go? The colonel's voice asked, the tone shifting back to professional concern. I am, sir, Elias said calmly. Good. A car is being dispatched to your location to provide you with a legal liaison. Do not speak further with those officers. We will handle it from here. Davies out. The line went dead. Elias lowered his phone, his expression unreadable. Pryor looked at Elias, then at Finch, with a mixture of terror and fury. "You," he hissed at Finch. "My office." Now he then turned to Elias, his demeanor now utterly transformed into one of groveling deference. "Master Sergeant Vance, I apologize. On behalf of the department. This never should have happened." Elias just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He offered no words of forgiveness. There was nothing to forgive. This was not an emotional issue. It was a systemic one. And the system was now grinding into motion. Less than 10 minutes later, a black sedan with government plates pulled up to the curb. A woman in a sharp business suit stepped out. She was radiating an aura of competence and controlled intensity that mirrored Elias's own. She walked directly to him, ignoring the police officers completely. "Elias," she said, shaking his hand. "Catherine Ross, from the JAG office's Civil Affairs Division. The colonel sent me. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Catherine," he said. "Just another Tuesday," she smiled faintly, a flash of shared understanding. "Good. Because we're not just handling it. We're ending it." She turned her attention to Sergeant Pryor, who looked as if he was about to be physically ill. "Sergeant, my name is Catherine Ross. I am Master Sergeant Vance's legal counsel. My client has been subjected to racial profiling, unlawful detention, and attempted assault by Officer Finch, all in violation of his rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. His civil rights have been egregiously violated." She opened a briefcase she was carrying and pulled out a single, crisp document. "This is a pre-litigation settlement offer. We are prepared to file a federal lawsuit against the Northwood Police Department and against Officer Garrett Finch in his personal capacity, seeking punitive and compensatory damages. However, to expedite this and avoid a protracted and publicly embarrassing legal battle for your department, we are offering a one-time settlement." She handed the document to the stunned sergeant. "My client will release all claims in exchange for a payment of $175,000, the immediate and permanent termination of Officer Finch's employment, and a mandatory, department-wide racial bias and de-escalation retraining program to be approved by our office. You have 48 hours to accept. After that, the offer is withdrawn, and we will see you in federal court, where I assure you the damages we seek will be significantly higher." Pryor took the paper as if it were radioactive. He stared at the number, $175,000. He looked at Finch, whose career was visibly imploding before his eyes. He looked at the phone cameras, which were still rolling, capturing every humiliating second. The power dynamic had not just been flipped, it had been completely inverted. An hour ago, Finch held all the power. Now he had none. Catherine turned back to Elias. "Let's go. We'll get your official statement back at the base." As they walked toward her car, the viral video was already beginning its journey across the internet. The footage from the mother's phone, clear and damning, was uploaded with the title, "Racist Cop Tries to Arrest Special Forces Soldier for Jogging While Black." By nightfall, it would have millions of views. Officer Finch was suspended without pay that afternoon, pending an internal affairs investigation that everyone knew had a foregone conclusion. The city council called an emergency session. The Northwood Police Department's official Facebook page was flooded with thousands of angry comments. The story was picked up by national news outlets. Elias Vance sat in a debriefing room back on the secure military base, the quiet hum of government efficiency a stark contrast to the morning's chaotic scene. The incident report was filed. The legal machinery was in motion. He had won, but it felt less like a victory and more like a weary confirmation of a battle he should never have had to fight. He had survived ambushes in hostile territories and outsmarted enemy combatants. But the most persistent threat he faced was the prejudice that could find him on any given street in the country he swore an oath to defend. The $175,000 was irrelevant. It would be donated to a civil rights organization. The firing of one officer was a drop in the ocean. But for a brief, clear moment in a sunlit park, the system had been forced to look in the mirror. And for one arrogant officer who saw a black man as a target, that reflection was the last thing he would see of his career. Elias closed his eyes, the phantom sensation of flashing red and blue lights still dancing on the inside of his eyelids, a stark reminder that for him, the war was always being fought on two fronts.